Hello, am I talking to Mrs. Cox? Yes. Ma'am, this is in regard with the classified advertisement that you had given for your apartment on rent. I'm interested. I'm a prospective tenant. I would like to rent your apartment. Yes, everything is fine. I just wanted to let you know one interesting fact about myself. I am an African. Well, my children, a very good afternoon. Yes, y'all have guessed right. Today I'm here with the poem Telephone Conversation by Woisoinka. Woisoinka, he is pronounced as Woisoinka. His name is Akinwande Olu Woisoinka. He was a Nigerian poet born in the 1930s. And in the 1950s, he went to Great Britain to pursue his education. At that point of time, Nigeria was under the colonial rule. And in Great Britain, Woisoinka faced a lot of trouble regarding racial discrimination. We all know, as Indians, we also have suffered under the colonial rule, and we know how these races, how the master race always looks down upon the aborigines, or rather the indigenous dwellers of a particular country that they colonize. Woisoinka was no exception. And he became a poet at a young age, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. Now, just for your information, that Nigeria was under the colonial rule till 1960. And even after that, it was ripped apart by several civil wars and then a dictatorial rule. I don't know whether you have heard the name of Sani Abacha, who was the last dictator who ruled over Nigeria. And then after it became a democracy. Now, along with Soinka, many other post-colonial writers who had to suffer under the racist and the racial discrimination, rather, under the racist colonizers, they hoped to bring attention to the injustices with the help of their literature, the injustices that the country had to suffer under the colonizers. Telephone Conversation is one such poem. Even though it describes an incident of racism, it represents the difficult condition of many artists and intellectuals like Soinka, who had to face discrimination while studying and working in the Western atmosphere. It describes the persistent and dispiriting difficulties the colonized people had to endure dealing with their colonizers. Such difficulties actually dehumanized them. And this particular poem, Telephone Conversation, with its biting wit and linguistic skill, makes a strong satire for the resilience and brilliance of the people who not only endured such treatment but also passionately resisted it. I said it was a satire. It satirizes the colonizers. It satirizes the discriminatory behavior that the colonizers had shown towards the natives. Now, what is a satire? A satire is a piece of literature in which irony and other literary devices are used to mock certain prevailing conditions or follies and foibles of the society. The most important element in a satire is wit and humor, and telephone conversation has no dearth of either of the two. So, no wonder Soyinka was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1986 because of the crucial contributions that he had made towards awakening the people against the injustices and the discriminatory behavior of the colonizers. In form, the poem is definitely literary but written in free verse. The poem has no particular or defined meter or rhyme scheme. It follows a conversational style with short exchanges between two people on either side of the telephone line. Here, one is a white lady who is going to rent her house out, and the other one a prospective tenant who happens to be an African. A black man, a colored man, who is always looked down upon by the white society, who always consider them superior by virtue of their skin color. Now, the style of telephone conversation captures the speaker's feeling, the unpredictability of the questions and answers of the characters, and also the themes that are involved in the span of the poem. As I told you, the poem is a satire that censures misguided behavior of the society, a satire against the political attitudes of people, and a satire relying heavily on balancing humor and wordplay as well as criticism. The tone of this poem is not serious. Why? Because the person who is speaking, that is the prospective tenant, pretends to be making a very sincere effort to be as clear as possible, when, as a matter of fact, he is confusing the lady, his landlady, very cleverly. Now, there are several literary devices involved in the poem. The first one is imagery. To point out one important visual image, I would like to quote the line, "Voice when it came, lipstick coated, gold rolled, cigarette holder picked." It creates a mental image of the lady who is only heard from the other side of the telephone line. The poet wonderfully enables us to visualize the lady as one who is very well bred and sophisticated and wealthy. Besides imagery, we have other figures of speech like irony. The greatest irony being in the fact that while the landlady pretends to be very well bred, well mannered, polite, but underlying that politeness, that courtesy, runs the racist feelings that she nurtures in her heart. She actually puts up a veneer of a liberal attitude. Her words and actions do not match with one another. She When she advertised for her accommodation, she was very liberal. She wanted to rent it out to any probable prospective tenant. But the moment she heard about the skin color of this tenant who called her, she started showing her hatred and indifference and discriminatory attitude towards the colored skins. This is the greatest irony in the poem. Besides irony, we also have repetition, where we find the repetitive use of the words red and light or very dark or light. These words are repeated throughout the poem. There are similes, onomatopoeias. Similes in what form? Simile, where do we find the simile? When the poet asks the lady what she meant by dark or very light, whether it was like milk chocolate or whether it was dark chocolate that she was referring to. Here, there is a simile involved. Onomatopoeia is found in the word squelching dark. It's a sound. There is alliteration in flight of fancy, alliteration in clinical, crushing in its light, a repetitive sound. Then there is a hyperbole when the poet points out the spectroscopic flight of fancy. He talks about the entire panoramic view of colors. That is a hyperbolic expression. Now, there are several symbols also involved in this poem. The first symbol is that of an omnibus or a bus. We all know that the double-decker red bus commutes all over England, and it becomes a symbol for people of color. The huge bus squelching tar is symbolic how the dominant white community treats those belonging to the ones, those belonging to them, to the minor class, to the minorities, or the black category. Then the cigarette holder of the lady also becomes a symbol of wealth, privilege, sophistication, and so on. Peroxide blonde, it is a symbol of the light color that we normally find in the white-skinned people. Blonde is often associated with the British rather. So it is symbolic here. And raven black, my bottom is raven black. What does it symbolize? The dark color, which is as dark as the feathers of a raven, symbolizing the evil that is often associated with the color black. Now let us go through the poem, and I will gradually expose other elements that are necessary for you to know in the course of reading the poem. Telephone conversation by Soinka. The price seemed reasonable. Location indifferent. Let us first read the lines and then I'm going to expose the meanings to you. The landlady swore. She lived off premises. Nothing remained but self-confession. Madam, I warned. I hate a wasted journey. I am African. Let us stop here and go back to the first line. Everything associated with the accommodation that was offered by the landlady seemed quite reasonable to this prospective tenant. He belonged to a place that was distant from the location of the house, so he preferred to call the lady up to settle other matters. And during the telephone conversation, they had a talk about the rent of the building, of the house, and it seemed quite affordable to the tenant. Other things were also fine by him. because there would be no interference, no intervention to his privacy, as the landlady swore she lived off premises. She did not live in the same compound where she was preferring that accommodation to the man. So when everything else was settled, and this man thought that it would be good for him to hire the accommodation, a thought just crossed his mind because of his previous experience with racism. This was a white landlady, a British landlady. So he thought it would be wise to let her know about his skin color. Because normally these British people who have been colonizers since centuries, they always tend to look down upon and discriminate the native people, especially the ones who are colored. So he says that he did not want a wasted journey. Why? Because he would have to go and then he would be, turned down, he would be sent back, he would not be given the accommodation, so that would be a wasted journey for him. So it was better to confess. Now, the importance of the word self-confession over here. When we make a confession, we know what is a confession. Confession is either of some sin that is committed by a man to a priest in order to get salvation or in order to be freed from that sin. Or it may be a confession by a criminal. It may be a confession made of a crime. Now here it is very important because the confession that he was going to make was about his color, that he was black. So which the poet highlights as though it was a crime or it was some sin that had been committed by a man because he was black, because he was an African. And as he had expected, the moment he says, I am African, silence. There is absolute silence on the other side of the coin. Silenced transmission of pressurized good breeding. Now here, let me tell you, the poet, or the tenant rather, had not seen the lady, his landlady. He was just forming an impression about her, hearing her voice from the other side of the phone. So when he heard that there was absolute silence after he had said that I am African, he thought that the lady was being silent because of her humility, of her good breeding. She was well bred, she was sophisticated, she was wealthy. And we all know that the British are known for their etiquettes. So the silence was a sign of her etiquette. Here the poet says, silence in transmission of pressurized good breeding. She was well bred, and that breeding pressurized her to remain quiet. She could not react to the confession of the man immediately. She became quiet, and then voice when it came, lipstick coated, long, gold rolled cigarette holder, pipped. After a pause, after a few minutes of silence, she spoke. And before that, the man had already formed a picture of the lady, an image of the lady in his mind. What is that image? She was good looking, she was fair complexioned, she was a wealthy woman, she was a British who was well bred, and she had worn lipstick, she had lipstick coated lips, and she was smoking through a cigarette holder that was gold rolled, that had been plated with gold, gilded. It was a gilded cigarette holder, indicating that she was wealthy. But when she spoke, the voice seemed to be pipping. Now, what is it? What does it mean? The word pipped over here has been used as a verb.
Yep.
Pip normally is associated with the sound of an egg cracking before a bird hatches, or it is like the shrill chirping of some bird. Now, here, what the poet had in mind exactly is not very clear, but we can take it as a very shrill and, unusual voice in which she asked her questions. The voice was so shrill that it almost seemed to shatter the image that the poet had already formed of her in his mind. God, I was foul, baby. And he was caught in a dilemma. It was a foul caught. He didn't know how to react to the question of the landlady. And look at the question that she asked. How dark? I had not misheard. Are you light or very dark? And the lady asked a very weird question. She inquired the intensity of the darkness of his complexion. How dark are you? I mean, how can one define the intensity of the darkness of one's complexion? Just as you cannot say how fair a lady is, a man also cannot define how dark he actually is. Now, to make it easier, she asks, are you light or very dark? Are you lightly dark? Or are you extremely dark? Or in other words, are you brown? Or are you black? That is what she wanted to ask. And here the tenant says, or the poet rather says, I had not misheard. The first question was not misheard. He was in a dilemma. That is the reason why he says, caught, I was foully. He was in a dilemma, but then when the second question was asked by the lady, he was certain that she was asking about the intensity of his skin color. Button B, button A. Now, here the poet uses wit. Look at the word play. Buttons are used by those people who have inserted a coin in a public telephone booth to make a call. So here button B, button A indicates that there was a choice given to him by the lady. Are you light or very dark? Light would be button B and very dark would be button A. So this is what we call satire. He makes fun. He is witty. He makes us laugh. But the laughter is a tongue-in-cheek laughter. It is a satire. And then he says, stench of rancid breath of public hide and speak. It was such an unpleasant question that the question seemed to give out a stench. It was a foul stench that he got from the question. The lady, who had been pretending to be so polished, so sophisticated, was actually a racist. She discriminated people on grounds of their color and race. So the rancid breath of public hide and speak. It was a stale, foul stench that he got from the question, from the voice of the lady. And actually actually, in reality, in public telephone booths, which are used by so many people, the receivers sometimes do give out a foul stench. So that is what he is equating, the foul stench of breath from the receivers to the stench that came from the lady's questions. Public hide and speak. There's a pun intended over here because it can have several shades of meanings. Now we have heard about hide and seek. Hide and seek is a game played by children, but over here the poet talks about public hide and speak. So on one hand, it refers to the telephone booths that are enclosed from all sides. So the person who is inside cannot be heard. He speaks in a hidden manner. Number two, the lady who is speaking is actually trying to hide her inner feelings. And number three, the tenant and the landlady are hidden from one another while speaking because the conversation is going on over a telephone. So the poet very cleverly uses a pun in the phrase hide and speak. The moment this is over, the poet repeats the word red. Red booth, red pillar box, red double-tired omnibus squelching tower. It was real. Shamed by ill-mannered silence, surrender. Pushed, dumbfounded to beg simplification. Now here he talks about himself. What was his immediate reaction? He started seeing red all around. Red is the color of fire, red is the color of anger. And this man becomes angry on knowing that for the landlady, his other qualifications did not matter. What he was as a person, what job he did, how much he earned, how much education he had pursued, all these were irrelevant because the racist lady only considered skin color to be the most important. So he talks about red booth. The telephone booths were red in color. Red pillar boxes. The pillar boxes where we drop in our letters. We used to drop in handwritten letters in those days. Were also red in color. And the red double-tired omnibus squelching tar. Omnibus is the original form of the word bus. The word bus has been derived from omnibus. Here he is talking about the double-decker buses, red buses of England. Double-storied omnibus, as I told you, is a symbol of the higher and the lower strata of the society. The red bus refers to the people who are oppressed by the colonizers. That is what gives out the squelching, crushing sound. The red double-tired omnibus squelching tar. The word squelching is an example of onomatopoeia. When we walk upon slush or mud wearing a rubber slipper, the sound, the sucking sound that the slipper gives out is called squelching. Now the tar had melted because of intense heat probably, and the bus moving on the road, on the tarred road, was making a squelching or a sucking sound. Here, this sound is also symbolic of oppressive rule of the colonizers. I told you it is an onomatopoeia. It was real. And the man was shocked out of his wits. He sees that it was real. It wasn't anything that he was imagining. shamed by ill-mannered silence. And he became quiet. He was dumbfounded, almost muted by his shock. So he thought that this silence was ill-mannered. It wasn't nice to be silent, not to respond to a lady on the other side. So he felt ashamed because he considered his silence to be ill-mannered. He surrendered. Surrender, pushed, dumbfounded to beg simplification. And he was once again further pushed. He was compelled to ask for a simplification, exactly what her inquiry was about. He was dumbfounded by two things. That whether a lady could ask such a question, and the stupidity of the question that she had asked. Whether it is possible for someone with minimum civility to ask such a question to a gentleman. These two things dumbfounded him, and he wanted a further clarification. Considerate she was, varying the emphasis. Are you dark or very light? And here he says that the lady was considerate. She was not annoyed by his query, asking for a clarification. And he catered to his query by saying, are you dark or very light?
I should have an
Here there is a slight reversal of the words. Earlier she had asked, are you light or very dark? And now she reverses her questions and she asks, are you dark or very light? Revelation came. And this was a moment of revelation. He realized, he understood that these questions were actually being asked. He was a bit confused earlier, but now he was certain. He was certain that these questions were being asked. And now he takes the opportunity to confuse the lady. He picks up the cue from her questions and asks, you mean like plain or milk chocolate? So let me clarify your question a little to myself. I think you mean whether my skin color is like plain dark chocolate or whether it is fairer like milk chocolate. Her assent was clinical. And she simply probably said, yes. Crushing in its light. Clinical and crushing. The repeated k sound. The C alliteration that produces a k sound over here tells us about the clinical approach of the lady. How apathetic she was towards people belonging to other races. Impersonality, and it also indicated her impersonal indifference towards such people of color, you can say. So, this impersonality also is another name for the hypocrisy that the lady possessed. She was a hypocrite. Initially, she had not mentioned anything about color, but the moment she came to know that he was black, she asked such weird questions. And when clarification was asked for, she assented. She said, yes, this is what I'm asking actually. So that tells us about her hypocrisy, her apathy, and also her discriminating attitude. Rapidly, wavelength adjusted. I chose.
Yes.
And immediately, the narrator or the speaker, the man, adjusted his wavelength with that of the lady. He realized that now the retaliation had to come in terms of the lady also. Whatever she had asked for, she will get adequate answers for her questions. Now begins the satire. I chose West African sepia. And he chooses a color of which he realized the lady would be ignorant of. And he makes her bear the brunt of his superior wit and vocabulary. The lady is ignorant, though she had pretended to be sophisticated and polished. She was basically not so well educated, not a very gracious and elegant lady, and it was quite contrary to the initial picture that the tenant had drawn of her in his mind. And so he matched her wavelength and told her, my color is a West African sepia, and as afterthought, down in my passport. And he says that this is the description of my color in my passport. My passport photograph defines me as a West African sepia. Now, what is West African sepia? Let me tell you. In passports in those days, the photographs used to be black and white. And in the black and white photograph, his color was brown. So he was not whitish, he was brown in color. That is what he refers to as West African sepia. Silence for spectroscopic flight of fancy. Very definitely and obviously the lady was unaware of this word sepia. So she was hunting in her mind to find an adequate connotation of the word sepia. And since it was something based on color, her imagination took a flight of fancy. What kind of flight? What kind of imagination? Imaginating the different variety of colors that we find in a spectroscope. So the poet wonderfully calls it a spectroscopic flight of fancy. She hunts in her imagination. What is the color? What is sepia? What is sepia? And flight of fancy, by the way, is another alliteration where the F sound is repeated.
Oh, very fine.
Till truthfulness changed her accent, hard on the mouthpiece. Finally, she surrendered. She gave in. She did not understand the meaning of the word sepia, and finally she gave in and she asks, "What's that?" Conceding, don't know what that is. So finally she gives in and she asks, "What are you talking about? I am unable to understand. I don't comprehend what you're trying to say. I don't know what that is. What is West African sepia? Please clarify that to me." Again, he uses another word which would be ambiguous to the lady, which would be incomprehensible to the lady. Like brunette, he says. That's dark, isn't it? What is brunette? Very dark brown color is called brunette. Normally, we say black-haired, brunettes and blondes. Blondes are very light-colored hair, golden-colored hair. Brunettes have a very dark brown color of their hair, almost reddish brown in color. And of course, black haired people, we Indians, Chinese, and the Asians, South Asians are all black haired. So he says, like brunette. And he's not wrong. In a black and white photograph, the brown color is like brunette. He says, like brunette. That's dark, isn't it? The lady doesn't know the meaning of the word brunette either. So you can understand the standard, the level of her literacy, her skill with words. Being an English lady, being a British, she doesn't understand the meanings of these words. And she asks a lame question. That's dark, isn't it? So she wants clarification now. That means you are dark. Your color is dark, right? Not altogether. Now he plays with the lady, has fun at her cost, mocks her by, misguiding and confusing her. This is not altogether. Facially I am brunette, but madam, you should see the rest of me. And the poet or the tenant says that you cannot call me very dark altogether, because my face is definitely brunette. But madam, you should see the rest of me, because several parts of the body have several colors, like he goes on to elaborate about his palms and feet, the soles of his feet and the palm of his hands. But before that he says, madam, you should see the rest of me. You can discern for yourself what you would consider to be very dark or light, or light or very dark, or very light or dark. Because I cannot comprehend the intensity of what you are saying. So I think you should have a glimpse of me. You should see me personally to understand the color of my body. Palm of my hand, soles of my feet are a peroxide blonde. Peroxide blonde is white. When your hair is bleached, the light yellowish color that is got is called peroxide blonde. Peroxide is a substance that is used for bleaching. So the soles of his feet and the palms of his hands were white in color, which is a visual image for us also, because if we have seen African people, the palms of their hands and the soles of their feet are white, and he is right about it. Friction caused foolishly, madam, by sitting down has turned my bottom raven black. The African man, the tenant, tries to clarify to the lady the color of his body. His description of the different colors of different parts of his body annoys the lady. Now, when his wittiness reaches the peak, the lady could not tolerate it any longer. So, the more he tries to describe himself by various colors, the more confused the lady becomes. And the speaker does not give up. The irony in the final lines lies in the fact that the speaker is still pretending politeness and ignorance. But actually he is mocking her racism by asking whether the lady would not like to meet him herself, meet him in person, to judge his skin color for herself. Now look at these final lines that I just quoted. Friction caused, foolishly madam, by sitting down, has turned my bottom raven black. Now he describes his bottom side, his buttocks, the height of irony. And he compares it to the black feathers of a raven. And what has turned it so black? Too much of friction because of sitting down. The lady is disgusted. By now she is not only confused, but she is terribly irritated. And the man senses that now she is going to bang down the receiver. And he pleads, "One moment, madam. Give me one more moment so that I get another chance to confuse you, to make fun of you, to make you a stock of laughter." Okay. And sensing her receiver rearing on the thunderclap, the moment he sensed that she was going to bang down her receiver and there would be a thunderclap that would hit his ears, he asked, "One moment, madam." "Madam," I pleaded, "wouldn't you rather see it for yourself?" The height of irony when he pleads the lady to justify his color by a personal experience of meeting him in person. "Wouldn't you rather see me for yourself? Then you would be able to judge my skin color better." Now, Soyinka shows how this black man steadily takes control of the conversation. He shows us how useless it is to judge and dehumanize a person on the grounds of race, color, and creed. The poem is basically a critique on racism and racial discrimination. We all know that regardless of the stringent laws that have been passed against racism, it is practiced covertly still now, till today, in many European countries by many people with that meanness and superiority complex. The identity of the person cannot be defined by the color of his skin. That is the most uncivilized way and the most uncivilized prejudice that we still nurture in our society. The poem is a plea against all such prejudices that are nurtured by class-conscious people of the society, especially the white section of the society. The poem also highlights that the quality of a person cannot be defined by his color. The quality is defined by his educational qualifications, by his social standing, by his behavior, and the way he treats society. So that is what the telephone conversation is all about. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you like it, please do subscribe and don't forget to press the bell button this time. Bye.